I'm going to record this on my computer. And so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the call. And we have Miguel and Morgan and Steve today. And my name is Karima Sharif, and my company's name is Ocean Agent. And I work on ocean conservation, focusing primarily on stopping illegal fishing worldwide. And so I am doing a presentation today in regards to Bahia de Banderas. So I'm going to share my screen with you.
Okay.
So presentation view. All right, so can you see a blue screen that says Bahia de Banderas?
Sí. Sí.
Sí, very good. So today we're going to go over a report card that I created after doing a full analysis of what this current situation as I see it for Bahia de Banderas, and discuss some potential goals that we should put together and outcomes for 2022. So I always like starting with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because water and I'm going to just move this over a little bit so I can see. There we go. So I like to start with the hierarchy of needs, because clean drinking water is a human right. And if people were only able to drink water from taps in Mexico, how much plastic would we save? And the other issue of air is that the burning of toxic trash would lower the cost of medical expenses, cancer, birth defects, and respiratory issues. And that is an issue that is all over the world. And as far as food goes, subsidizing fisheries is not a winning situation. And unfortunately, the Mexican government does subsidize fisheries. If there is a ban on fishing happening, fishermen get paid, I think it's 1,400 pesos per month to be able to feed their family. And one of the things that I've always loved about the idea of, you can give a woman a fish for a day to feed her family, or you could teach that woman how to fish for a lifetime, provided that there are fish to be had. So that's what we kind of want to do. So as an ocean agent, one of the places that I work a lot in is Gabon. And Gabon is an interesting place because it is right in the middle of the Gulf of Guinea. And I've worked there since 2018. And the reason I wanted to bring this to light is because there are very many similarities between what is happening in Mexico, in Bahia de Banderas, and in the Gulf of Guinea. So marine enforcement is something that is very expensive. And one of the things that is important, and the Gulf of Guinea is beginning to coalesce in this manner, is using satellite technology and sharing the jurisdiction in such a way so that the entire Gulf can be treated as one unit. And in Bahia de Banderas, those surrounding areas also impact what happened in the bay. And so if there is an issue with pollution coming from fish plants, or from garbage being thrown from the shores of Guinea, all of that goes all the way down to Angola through the Benguela Current. And one of the things that happens, there's actually 5 different currents that are in this region, which makes it such an incredible fishing area. So Steve touched on this a little bit when we were chatting before the button is that, you know, as foreigners, we do need to be extremely sensitive to indigenous culture. And so a Caucasian woman coming to Africa to speak to the local people about protecting their fishing grounds has to be handled in a very compassionate and you know, in a way that is sensitive to the fact that we are visitors. And, you know, the thing of a bunch of expats telling Mexicans how to protect their bay while still displacing them and destroying the local culture so that we can have cheaper condos in tropical places is a paradigm where there's a little bit of resistance around that whole thing, because the quaintness that everyone fell in love with originally is being displaced and obliterated. So there needs to be a balance. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir, because you do understand that issue. And the other thing that I wanted to touch upon that is very similar to Gabon and the Bahia de Banderas is that corruption is real. In the Gulf of Guinea, we're dealing with piracy and drug lords and slavery, arms dealers, and much of illegal fishing is run by mafia. And this is a similar issue, as mentioned earlier, with the cartels. And we'll speak more about that in the presentation, probably off record, because I do have some ideas as far as how to publicize certain aspects of what we're doing, but have a movement that is a little more hidden and not advertising who exactly we are. So I am going to just briefly say that Bahia de Banderas stands for flags. And in 1525, when the Spaniards first arrived in the area, it was occupied by various settlers, warlike Indians that carried spears and shields, carrying cotton flags of different colors while defending their territory. And so that is why Bahia de Banderas, the Bay of Flags, is called that. And yeah, and from a geological standpoint, a lot of geologists believe that the original attachment point of this southern point here of the Baja California Peninsula was a rift off of the North American plate millions of years ago, forming the Gulf of California.
Right.
And so, as you probably know, Bahia de Banderas is one of the most important breeding and birthing grounds for the humpback whales. And Bahia de Banderas is known as the largest bay in Mexico. And it stretches over 2 states of 62 miles, and the total area is 298.6 miles square. And so that's about 80 kilometers. It takes about 2 hours or an hour to cross the whole thing. And the elevation difference from one end to the other is interesting also, because of the plate tectonics and whatnot. You have an elevation shift of about 5,000 feet. And the depth of the actual bay is so incredibly deep that's why the whales come there to feed, because it drops from about 1,000 feet to about 4,200. And it is considered, Bahia de Banderas officially is a UNESCO heritage site. And from probably July to December, that is when the sea turtles are coming in during the springtime to do the nesting. And that is also a similarity with Gabon, because the leatherback turtles nest there also. So let's see here. We have the maximum depth of Bahia de Banderas is actually 4,711 feet, which is 1,436 meters. So the next slide shows what that seafloor looks like. And for fisheries analysts, we call that the bathymetry of the bottom. So based on this, you can kind of guess where the best fishing grounds are, because generally fish like to hang out where these currents are happening and where these ridges are underwater. So this slide here shows a little bit of what the existing currents are. The Peru current going this way, and then you have the Pacific Equatorial current moving upward, and then the California current. And this is an image of what is that mango back there. we have an image of what that deep point of the 4,711 feet look like. And that's why the whales love feeding there. So overall in Mexico, we have 13 marine protected areas that are fully protected zones. And so that comes to 0.11%, which is 3,439 of the ocean estate. There are 2 proposed marine protected areas that will bring it up to 7.5, which is fantastic. And a lot of South American countries are following suit. Ecuador, Panama, Costa Rica are all countries that some of them have even surpassed the goal of having the global goal is to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030. And so we are definitely on our way, but a lot of work still needs to be done. So one organization, the Marine Conservation Institute, puts together this atlas for different countries. And so as far as fully high protected areas in Mexico, we're looking at about 4.7%. And when I was paddleboarding in the Bahia de Banderas in December, one of the things that we were graced with was seeing a mother with a cub. So I just wanted to show you guys a little excerpt of a video that was very touching to me, and I will just cue it up for you.
Extraterrestrial life.
Sorry about that. We'll just move this to the right spot here. 18, there we go.
Our mom and baby have a more playful attitude.
The whales are actually playing right now at the surface. Often when they go down for an extended period, the mother might actually be nursing that calf. And then they'll come up and that calf's got that nice, rich energy from that sweet milk, and it'll often play at the surface with the mother. It's been said that humpback whales, when they have babies and they bring them into these bays, these protected bays, they actually communicate with each other in whispers. They speak really softly to each other because they don't want orcas to hear their vocalizations. Whales have some of the loudest vocalizations of any animals on our planet. So when mum and baby are in these protected areas, they whisper so softly to each other to avoid the detection of the killer whales.
All right, I have one more video to share with, oh, that is actually the same one there. This is another one about the manta rays, because one of the things about the manta rays is that you have the protected areas pretty near to you of the Socorro Islands, and there is a very interesting triangulation that happens between the Socorro Islands and Bahia de Banderas, and this video explains that triangulation. So I'll just cue it up to the part that I wanted to share with you. All right.
Ranging from endocrine disruption to cancer.
So there is the double danger of microplastics. There are the pollutants itself that plastic leach, and the pollutants that are absorbed during their stay in the ocean. The main problem for manta rays is that they can live for more than 30 years. So during this long life, they can accumulate a lot of those pollutants. And so filtering plastics for so many years, it can make damages at many levels.
Tanya also received special permission to collect small tissue samples, which she will analyze to see if the toxic chemical.
Cut it off there, but these I'll provide the links to these videos because the entire videos are quite fascinating. But let's see here. I think I kind of queued up the wrong section on that video. Let's see. But in any event, the footage was showing that triangle that exists right outside of Bahia de Banderas. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about were the turtles, because there are currently 4 different species that are hatched at the coast of Nayarit, and it's the olive wriggly, the green turtle, the leatherback, and the hawksbill turtles. And I was hoping that Wild Coast would be on this call, but they had their annual meeting this morning, so they won't be able to join us, but we will be sending them a copy of this video. So they have been very successful in the work that they've been doing around Cabo Pomo, as far as stopping hotel development in order to save the reefs that are protected there. And so the interesting techniques that they used was actually mobilizing Mexican wrestlers to advocate on behalf of the turtle population. And so even though the population of the sea turtles has been steeply declining over the last 50 years, they are protected by the Mexican government and by the United States Endangered Species Act of 1973. So Wild Coast Live, like one of the things that I really appreciate that they are able to do is to connect with the local population by understanding what people respond to. So that's why I really loved the fact that they used wrestlers in their campaign to connect with the local population, because you really do have to be pretty creative. And I think that is a very important piece of the puzzle. So every year in June, hundreds of sea turtles do come to the beaches of the Riviera Nayarit to complete their life cycle. And so it's interesting because a lot of the nesting grounds are in that hotel zone. And let's see here. One of the organizations that you have north of Sayulita is the National Sea Turtle Conservation Program. And so the short form is CONAPE, and so they have released 1 million every season. They release about 1 million hatchlings into the sea, which is absolutely amazing. So this is the first part of the report card. We wanted to figure out like how we would grade Bahia de Banderas as far as their turtle conservation. One thing that has become apparent is that poaching is still happening because the eggs and the actual turtles are still a traditional meal in Mexican culture. And so the poaching still happens. And so the grade that we gave them, gave the bay is C, because sewage is very tied to these nesting grounds. And as all of you can attest to, the sewage issue is definitely something that we want to also address. And the mesh size of the artisanal fishing fleets, from what I can tell, they're too small, and we don't understand yet how many turtles get caught in those nets. And as far as I know, from the research that we've done, there are currently no restrictions as far as limiting the zone in which fishing can happen during that nesting period. So that's why we've given them a C on that front. And this was a video that was provided by Mariana Mayan. And this, you probably recognize where it was, but this was from August in 2021.
Oh, that's the river.
Yeah. An all too common event that we see in Bucerias is the river flowing like this with trash and raw sewage. Just because if you had ever ridden horseback up this river mouth in the dry season, it's a trash dump from the center of town all the way up into the mountains. It's just trash dump after trash dump after trash dump in the riverbed.
I believe it. And this footage that Mariana provided, she was saying that it was absolutely disgusting, the smell, and that this definitely happens often when it's not tourist season.
Yeah. And right there, where the left-hand side of the screen where you just finished, that is we don't have a sewage treatment plant in Bucerias. It's a pump station.
Right.
And in the last few years, there has been an auxiliary diesel pump that has been installed so that in the event of a power outage or in the event of an outage of the existing electric pumps, the diesel pump can step in and keep the sewage pumping up. And if I'm correct, the sewage from Bucerias is pumped up to near the town of Valle, up in the hills, and then it's treated. Theoretically treated near Valle and then released into one of the rivers in the area. But what we observe frequently in Bucerias is that the pumps go out, and before they had redundant pumping from the diesel pump, when the pumps went out, it took them days to get parts because everything comes from Guadalajara. And so in the days when they were waiting for parts for the pumps, it would just be raw sewage dumping into the bay for days. And then you could just see the brown streak going out into the bay, and it would flood the coast. The beaches would just be flooded with raw untreated sewage.
I do have one more video to show that Mariana provided us.
Oh, God.
Yeah, there's the brown. And the locals are just unfazed by it.
There's a person swimming right there in the middle of the screen, which is absolutely unbelievable. Okay, so these were some photographs that were provided by Morgan. And construction and demolition projects. These are statistics from U.S. landfills, but you're looking at 145 million tons of waste, according to the APA, that was dumped in 2018. More than 75% of all construction waste is wood, drywall, asphalt, shingles, and so forth. So it all ends up in landfill. But this is all seepage from the actual construction process at Esmeralda. And
That one is at near Pico.
Near Pico, thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the things is a lot of this trash and seepage comes from the concrete, and the demolition is about 65.5%. So here is a list of a lot of those formaldehydes, the asbestos, the paint thinners, the fiberglass. So all of these things are all impacting the bay. So with all of this rampant construction and affluence coming down into the bay, it is definitely having its impact. So as far as a grade for Bahia de Banderas and Buceria specifically, as far as sewage management on a scale of A, B, C, D, E, F, we gave them an F. And this is also in regards to how Bucerias is how they're dealing with the wastewater from the construction sites is the next point. And the grade that we gave them is a D. Here is an image of the inshore fishing that is happening, and the artisanal fishing fleet definitely needs to be educated as far as the impact of what kind of nets they're using primarily, and what seasons they are fishing within the bay.
Great.
So here's a list of what the most common fish are, and this is provided by Fish in Varadero. And so the stock assessments generally for the Gulf of Mexico are a little bit different from Bahia de Banderas, but the interesting thing is that with a lot of the catch that is for recreational catch, it's a slightly different number than what is being considered currently. But, as far as tuna, they're very taxed. The white marlin assessment indicates that they are being overfished. And the other issue is shrimp trawlers because of the massive amount of bycatch that is involved with that. And the mahi-mahi is still doing pretty well and stable. So as far as when you go to a restaurant, some fish that are probably better to choose would be the dorado or the mahi-mahi or the snapper. Which I did see on menus quite often. So the bluefish is definitely, the bluefish are not doing well. The grouper aren't doing very well. So that would be a sign as far as stock assessments and choices when you are buying at a restaurant or the local market, which fish to stay away from. And let's see, we have another stock assessment that was done in 2016 for the amberjack, and they are also being overfished. And let's see here, what other fish do I have on the list? Most of the sailfish are catch and release nowadays on the coasts of Mexico.
Why?
Because they're endangered.
Yes, because their population is dwindling. And
Are they catching? Are they hooking a lot of small ones and releasing them, or what? Are they?
They tend to go for the larger sizes because of that whole sportsman aspect of being able to catch the biggest ones. And the assessment from the International Scientific Committee for tuna and tuna-like species for the North Pacific Ocean is that the tuna stocks are definitely being fished.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have? Pacific mackerel is not being overfished, and this is a stock assessment from 2019. So mackerel is definitely a good choice. So I can provide this information in more detail after the presentation. This is a program that I use called Skylight that is produced by Vulcan, and I can zoom in on different parts of the planet and see exactly what kind of illegal fishing activity is happening. So as you can see, a lot of the activity is higher up here, but this is more for transshipments that are happening. So these boats actually have an AIS. So this is not a representation of the smaller local fishers that happen. But this is more transshipments at sea. So this area here is a protected zone outside of the bay. And you can see this footage was from November 8th, 2021, that there was a boat that was transiting right through that protected area. And these show like where the majority, and this is for tuna longliners specifically. And here are some measurements as far as lobster, octopus, sea cucumber, and pink snail, and what sizes are acceptable. And here's another slide showing some of the typical behavioral fishing as far as longline tuna goes. And so Bahia de Banderas is a very abundant fishing area, also for the sheephead and for the snapper, as I mentioned, the skipjack. And one of the things that I wanted to include in the presentation was the wild oyster population, because there are certain months of the year, 2 months out of the year, that they are harvested. So that the rest of the year it remains closed. And one of the things that I found out was, and this might be a good reason for me to come down to Bucerias again, is that on April 23rd, you have your Oyster Festival. So that would be great to come in. I think you're having your 18th annual, which sounds fabulous. And so the oysters are safe to eat, as we've discussed, and the ban is in effect from April through to October. So the type of oysters that are available are often the Pacific oysters, and there's a Baja Kumamoto that is also being grown in Mexico as far as aquaculture. And one of the incredible things about oysters in general is that they do filter about 50 gallons of water per day. So they definitely increase the oxygenation of the water because more photosynthesis can happen, and they filter a lot of the toxins from sewage and whatnot through their systems. So as far as the grade that Bahia de Banderas would get for their management of the wild oysters, we decided to give them a C, because of the tie to sewage. And this is very similar to the issue we were having with the turtles. You can't really have this be a protected bay and have all of that sewage impacting the wild oyster population and also the turtles. So one of the things I also included in this presentation was the burning of trash, because the burning of trash in Mexico is illegal. And as we talked about earlier, that education is so important and that community outreach is necessary, and waste management services need to be improved. And much of it is an aspect of ignorance. And I was thinking that having some, I remember seeing when we were there, the trucks going through with the bullhorns advertising that they were selling certain products on the trucks, like coconuts or something like that. And I feel like, I saw this in Tunisia also, where a lot of the news that is distributed in the region is presented by bullhorns. So perhaps that's something that we could do with the local Spanish-speaking communities. So as far as the waste management and the burning of toxic trash, we did give them an F. Because it does, I'm going to go back to this slide here because it really shows, this is a campaign that was done in Indonesia. And as far as literacy rates, this type of picture representation expresses to the locals how, when all of this junk ends up being burnt and into the air, that when the chickens are eating it, that the eggs are contaminated, giving the locals a myriad of issues from respiratory to cancers, as we know. And so the final report card for Bahia de Banderas does not look that great, but that's why we're gathering together, is to hopefully make a difference. And so we have an F for the management of sewage. The waste flow from construction sites and vessels within the 3-mile limit was a D. And the oyster management was a C. The waste management and toxic trash burning, an F. So these were the 5 goals that we set aside to focus on. And the first one is using science, advocacy, and law to hold polluters accountable, to stop destructive behaviors in Bahia de Banderas and promote education as far as the impacts of the sewage dumping into the bay and how that affects tourism. And we are interested in creating a petition for the Secretariat of the Environment and Natural Resources to develop and implement and enforce a Clean Water Act in Nayarit. As far as the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, educating the community as far as the harmful impacts of burning toxic trash, especially plastics. And number 4, promoting the sustainable fishing practices in the region to protect local fish populations, as well as the local artisanal fishing community. And the last point being to promote the oyster reef restoration, to filter and clean the water column, sustainable oyster aquaculture, which is happening in other parts of Mexico. There was one that I was reading about in particular that was a all women run collective. So there's already a movement towards more sustainable oyster aquaculture to protect the wild oyster populations. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the importance of the political will, because the president is on board for doing quite a few things, and the promises that have been made in COP26 were assigned to he signed the Sustainable Ocean Economy, which is a span from 2021 to 2024, as far as the forest and land use and management of methane pledge that he signed. So I do feel like contacting the governor of Nayarit is going to at some point be an important part of, once we've coalesced some legal support as far as getting some of these things that are missing in terms of fresh water and air acts being put in place. Because as far as I can tell, those things don't quite exist yet. So I started brainstorming as far as what type of expenses we would need. And this is something that we certainly need to elaborate on. But at this point, the hotel engagement and legal are probably the more significant expenses. And at this point, I wanted to open up our discussion as far as what our roles are going to be. And during 2022, I am committing a year to be the project manager. And if Morgan is willing to be our executive assistant to keep all of the points, the 5 points as far as our goals on track. What I'd like to do is to be able to assign one person per goal to lead that initiative throughout the year. And I would also like to have a Spanish speaking team so that we can hold some educational webinars in Spanish by locals for locals. And when we were talking to Miguel, he offered to be our treasurer. And there is a VP foundation that I've gotten grants for in the past for $25,000. And I'm planning on approaching them again as far as Bahia de Banderas to see if we can get a little bit of money together to help support some of the admin costs and the printing costs to produce flyers to share with the local community. And we'll probably end up creating some groups on Signal to have like an enforcement call, to have a group that are dealing just with the sewage issue, have a separate group that is dealing with the aquaculture issue with the oysters. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to compartmentalize it, because there's such large goals that we have to figure out a way to be able to divide and conquer. And I was hoping that Mariana was going to be on the call to discuss a little bit about the PR piece. And one of the things that would be useful, and I'm just putting this out as to put your feelers out, if you do know any lawyers or know of anyone who is able to work in environmental law locally that can help us out on a pro bono basis or anything like that, please let us know. So as far as the completion, I definitely feel like we are, let's see, we only have 6 minutes left. I'm sorry the presentation was so long, but I do see groups getting together, and I wanted to finish on this photo. This is one of our last days in Bucerías. We have the Amigo de Bucerías. There are things that are moving in the right direction, but there is still so much work to be done. So do you guys have another 15 minutes beyond 11 to talk about how to organize a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was hoping we would do a little brainstorming about some of these different goals.
Yeah, that sounds good. And
what did you say, Steve? What did you say?
I said absolutely. I have time.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great. So let's start with, I'm going to go back to the slide that is the goals, and we'll just go through each of them, because let's start with the pollution piece, because I feel like the sewage issue is probably one of the biggest issues. And as far as figuring out who is responsible and who we need to advocate to on a political level, that's definitely something that needs to happen with local Spanish-speaking individuals.
Right. I think, Steve, were you going to say something?
Well, this is going to be a tricky situation, and here is some of the things that we're going to have to navigate around the sewage issue. Is number one, the developers don't care. Mm-hmm. Most of the expats that come here to live here don't leave their condos, so they don't care. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be challenging for, and part of what ties into this is that development is happening faster than our local municipalities can keep up with sewage treatment. and the build out of infrastructure. And so, last weekend we went for a beach day at one of our favorite places in Buceria, Suca, and we had to drive through a quarter of a mile of raw sewage because of one of the pump stations on the north end of Buceria was down. And when any of the pump stations go down, the street, in this particular situation, the street floods with raw sewage, and then it finds its way to the ocean. And later on, we went for a horseback ride on the beach, and we rode through the construction site that you showed pictures of near Los Picos, and they're pumping the raw sewage out of the construction site directly onto the beach. Kids are playing right there. There's no, and so the point is, we have a lot to navigate in terms of how do we approach this when the developers are bribing the local officials so that they're not paying ahead to build out infrastructure before these towers are built. And so it all becomes reactive in terms of Oramapas is our local municipal water and sewage company. I don't see that, from my perspective, I may be wrong, but I don't see that they have the money or the engineering resources to approach this proactively. And so I think if there's a way that we can approach the federal government to say, look, you as the federal government would be greatly benefited to protect this gem, natural resource of Mexico by just helping out your local municipalities with engineering resources and money so that they can stay ahead of the development. The development's not going to stop. And the developers are not going to pay their taxes for sewage. It's just never going to happen. And enforcement, once again, it's another thing where the developers don't care. They're going to buy a piece of land, build a tower, and when they sell their tower, they're off to the next opportunity. It's not their problem. And, to be quite honest, if we try to enforce it, we're going to run into problems with the cartel. So I don't see enforcement as the issue. I think that we need to help implore the federal government to step in with money and engineering assistance.
Absolutely.
So can I have 1 minute on the subject?
Absolutely.
I believe at this point in in time, I think that one of the most positive ways, productive ways that we can utilize our time is to go to and speak to friends of Bucerias, entities like that, because they have already had the groundwork of what works and what doesn't work. I think that the legal issue of it is very, very important, because without the cartel, as we've found out, there are avenues and ways with our sound pollution here, the noise pollution, that there are avenues and ways that we may not even be aware of to be able to at least attempt to try to see which direction is the most productive for us in the regards of the legal. So I feel that the legal is a very important point in this. The reason why I'm talking about Friends for Bucerias is because it's been quite a while, but our friend Catherine and we found out that there was, and I believe it may have been done through Friends for Bucerias, they were having a cleanup of the town mostly on the beach and in the plaza area, and it was like the turnout was pretty amazing, and there was a lot of Mexicans involved. So I don't want to underestimate their involvement or just the feedback and all of the assets that are available to people who know the area, who know what work, know what don't work. Be careful of this. This is really something we should look into and things like that. So I want to be, anyway, so I think that, to me, that the guidelines of the grades of those important benchmarks that we have to try and focus on is something we need to have in hand, and to go out in the community and see what works, what doesn't work, and to get some feedback and talk to entities that are already established here, so we can at least get some direction from them, so we're not spinning our wheels.
Karima, were they invited to this meeting? I know you've had some contact with them.
Yes, they were. I did send a message to Neil, who was Friends of Bucerias. So he did not respond to the emails that I sent. So I wasn't sure if he was going to be joining this call, but I feel like this would be one of the action items that we would consider as a number one, is to, first of all, figure out who on the federal level, excuse me, on the federal level, thank you, we would need to be getting in touch with. I know that Mariana, she's going to be reporting that last sewage issue that happened, and requesting a investigation, because that is really one of the first steps. We need to make sure to record every time one of these sewage spills happens. We need to be able to record when they happen and what that volume of waste that is coming through is very important to have that evidence collection. Another important piece that we need is water sampling, so that we know what is currently being, what the quality of the water is currently, so that we can present that to the federal officials.
Steve, well, that's a great one. I think we were going to ask Steve, as a chemical engineer, if he knew of any mechanism that we might be able to utilize down here for that.
That's something that I'm working on. And Michael, thanks for your perspective. I have a very limited perspective because I work so much down here. I have a very limited interaction with the locals, and I agree. We definitely need to take in as much of the local resources as we can. And so just so you understand, my perspective on water quality is I've managed a number of different laboratories, and I'm a biochemist by training, but most of my professional career has been in analytical chemistry. So I've got some pretty extensive experience utilizing the United States EPA water quality testing methods. And so I've set up and validated a number of different EPA water quality testing. And so this is something that I've spoken with Carlos Moretti about, and Carlos is in direct contact and has put me in contact with a group of professors at the university near the University of Guadalajara near the airport in Puerto Vallarta. And so I think Carlos and the professors at the university will probably have some additional resources and insight on this for us. And just so you know, the professors at the university that I've been introduced to, they're not doing water quality measurement. What they're doing is they are assessing the genetics associated with coral resistance to sunscreens and herbicides. So they're trying to identify the genetics of the coral that gives resistance to the sunscreen and herbicides that are causing the die-off in the coral. And I think they may be able to help us with things like artificial fisheries of oysters and coral that could be part of a restoration program.
So can I say something really quickly?
Absolutely.
As quickly as I can. So as you and I talked about yesterday, Steve, we talked about these condos and about the guys that build them. They do what they need to do and they move on. One of the things that I'm realizing as the process of we're discussing things, that it's not just left like open-ended. Each one of these condos, they have a condos owner association.
Yep.
And to me, each one of those are being impacted by all of the issues we're talking about. So we're just not left with just nothing in our hands. And I've been told by the Sandrinas, who has had success on the other side of the river, strength in numbers. And so possibly for us to approach that in that direction too, about to go to each one of these associations to find somebody to step up for that. And I think there's a great asset there about posting, signs for their owners and for any of their guests, and a lot of them get rented out. We do not use the sunscreens from this facility. We highly recommend just for that, and also their involvement to be able to just get them enrolled in what we're trying to do. So
Yeah.
It's another asset that I think that I've just kind of processed through what you've been talking about, Steve.
Mhm. Yeah. And this is
And
why
I
I'm
wa-
excited Mariana is involved in the project, because I think that branding and marketing in a tourist area is a
Right.
very, very strong tool, because if we can encourage a resort to do a pilot artificial reef where that artificial reef is seeded with aquaculture coral and aquaculture oysters, and we can show a successful model of creating an artificial reef that becomes a destination for scuba divers and snorkelers, and it can be sponsored by a resort, I think that that is a huge marketing asset for a resort to say, we are part of the Bahia de Banderas restoration project, and we have a working model of an artificial reef that is flourishing with artificially cultured coral and artificially cultured oysters, and it is attracting fish and it's cleaning the water, and it's a beautiful asset to our resort.
Right.
I think you just gave us the name of our project. Karima, did you hear that?
What?
The Bahia de Banderas restoration project.
Yeah, there we go.
We
Yeah.
finally got it. It just went out there. I also wanted to say, I sent you that article from the Mexican Daily News, which
About
is, it goes to gringos primarily because it's English. But they gave the Bay a bad grade based on E. coli presence.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if we can engage them to help us. And there's also the Puerto Vallarta news. They're all online, but they are primarily to gringos, but they might be able to get us, some of that energy and strength of numbers by letting them know what we're doing and identifying and educating about the problem. And it can be, I don't know how much we want to go into the sewage stuff, or if we would just really want to focus on things that maybe tourists, when they come down to visit, or people who live down here transitionally, can do to make things better. But just another way to bring awareness through, PR or advertising by getting an article written, maybe.
Yeah. I think sewage is really low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Because it's got everybody knows. You don't have to educate people that sewage is disgusting.
Right.
You don't have to educate people that sewage makes the beaches uninhabitable. I think that there's no education necessary. That's awareness only. And so I think we don't need an education campaign with sewage. We need an awareness campaign. And I think it's also pretty well understood among the tourist industry that sewage is bad press.
Right.
So if we get an article like that written, then it might ring alarm bells to the local resorts and stuff, do you think?
I hope so.
Would it have the opposite effect is what I'm worrying about?
Well, and here is where I think the educational challenge lies, is educating the resorts in the value of investing in infrastructure.
Right.
That to me is the educational challenge, is because we have to sell them on the idea that investing in infrastructure will lead to future profits. They're business people. You have to speak to them in their language. They want to know if they're going to invest in marketing that is going to bring more people to their doors.
Right.
If they invest in infrastructure, they want to know that that's going to preserve their ability to function as a business.
You know what I'd like to find out is who was responsible, who was able to get them. And each one on the other side of the river, each one of those streets those cross streets that ended at the ocean, they built those little ramps that go down, those little kind of resting places, the bathrooms. Somebody was responsible for being able to get that done at each one of those things. And they talk to somebody and go like, we need to do this. It's going to be beneficial for you. And they talk somebody paid for it. How did they do it and who did it?
Yeah.
And that's like what you're saying, that maybe in that regards, like how did that process end up with those results? Maybe take that to what you're talking about.
The Friends of Bucerias might know that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just putting together a little task list for us of priorities. And so I do have one to meet with the Amigos de Bucerias, and hopefully we'll be able to schedule a meeting just with them specifically to talk about this. And then
So Karima, can we pause with that one just so that you're aware?
Yeah.
There's two groups.
Okay.
One is Friends of Bucerias and one
Okay.
is Amigos de Bucerias. And so they're both active.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting that they're separate and
Okay.
they both seem to be run by a gringo. So, but I don't know why they're separate.
Okay. Interesting.
Do you know, Steve?
No.
I don't.
Okay.
I would
Okay.
assume one's Canadian, one's American.
Interesting.
Okay.
One
Maybe.
might be gringos, one might be Mexicans.
But they're not.
Yeah.
No.
At least
Okay.
not when I looked
Okay, that's
into
interesting.
their,
I never knew
not
that
when I
either.
looked into their organizations.
Okay.
But-
Oh, thanks for letting me know, because I thought that was just, they were the same organization. That's
Totally
helpful.
different.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know which one Neil is associated with. Is he
Neil
with Friends?
is part of Amigos de Banderas. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we have not.
Banderas or Amigos de Bucerias?
De Bucerias.
Amigos de Bucerias. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yes, we'll have to reach out to them. I do think that Linda, who we met, she's a journalist. Once we get an idea of the content of the article, that she potentially could maybe a little further down the road, once we have more of an action plan put in place, because I think that's really what we need to do, is to outline what steps are needed as far as these different levels. And I'm glad to hear that you think that the sewage dumping is a low-hanging fruit. And I do think that that's going to be the primary thing, because they're all tied to each other. And I feel that if we can at least address the sewage issue, then we'll be, pretty much 50% there.
I think that will be the single action. Well, it's not a single action, but it's a goal that would have the most immediate impact on the health.
I agree. Based on what I've seen through COVID, because of COVID, for the last 2 years, the water between Bucerias and La Cruz has become noticeably, and I have no quantitative evidence. This is all qualitative assessment just from me paddling. But after the travel restrictions from COVID have lifted, the water has gone back dramatically to lower visibility as it was before COVID. During COVID, I saw more turtles, I saw more dolphins, I saw more whales. And I hate to say this, but I think that part of it is because we've had 2 years without Semana Santa celebrations. And I'm not like pointing the finger at the Mexican culture, but Semana Santa is a disaster for the beaches of Bucerias.
Is that the one that's in January?
No, this is Easter.
Easter, okay.
It's a week. Semana Santa is a week of partying, vomit, human feces, trash, and turtle eating. I mean, this is a Mexican tradition for Semana Santa is eating turtles. And I don't want to get into culture bashing, but I believe strongly that there's a direct correlation between the increase in visibility in the water in the last 2 years, the increase in the number of turtles, and the increase in the number of dolphins and whales, because we've went 2 years without Semana Santa celebrations. We've gone 2 years with partially occupied towers in Bucerias. Construction was nearly halted for those 2 years.
Right.
I'm afraid to say that lifting travel restrictions, bringing the tourists back, is an environmental disaster for the Bay.
Right.
No, last season when we were here, we were all out there paddleboarding. We were seeing whales and all kinds of
Dolphins
life.
and rays
and it
They
was,
ca-
it
they
was,
came in
it was,
closer?
it was just a festival every time you went on a paddleboard. This year,
different this year.
immediately, it's disgusting. The
The
water is so
visibility is
dirty.
horrible. I have an
Yeah.
ear infection right now. I've
Oh,
never
yeah.
had an ear in the 8 years that we have been wintering here in the Bay. I've never had an ear infection.
Mhm. Wow.
If we're getting to be like Sayulita.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And they literally had no sewage treatment for a year.
Wow.
Longer than that. It was more
Was
like
it longer
3
than
years.
that?
Yeah. And who knows if, and here's the other thing about Sayulita is Sayulita may have built a new sewage treatment plant, but are they managing it?
Right.
And is there any management of the sewage upstream from Sayulita?
Mhm. That
You
is
know, there's not a
very
lot of
important.
population currently upstream from Sayulita, but there are massive new cuts in the hillsides above Sayulita because of the new highway.
Right.
Yeah.
And are they managing the new runoff from the new highway? Are they managing there's going to be a boom of new population upstream from Sayulita because of the new highway, because Sayulita, there's nowhere else to grow.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they're kind of locked in. And so all of the people that want to be in Sayulita are going to start developing around Sayulita, and the new highway is going to really open up a lot of new development in that watershed.
Right.
Are there any municipal meetings that are open to the public that occur in Nayarit?
We don't know.
That I
Okay,
don't know.
all right. I think that's
That's
something
one of the things
I'm
we,
gonna need to
that's one of
find
the things
out.
we find out. Yeah, there's a couple of sources that I want to just talk to. And plus I'm also going to work on talking to that guy from Riviera Nayarit, which she is not given up. We don't even know at this point, for some reason, it got mentioned that she's not even absolutely positive he's going to be involved this year for the art walk. So I'm going to continue pursuing that. And there's a couple other things I want to check on to see if we can get that kind of information.
Mhm. That sounds great. That's one thing that I wanted to ask you about, if you had any success getting a hold of that person. And I feel like, you know, at the beginning, it feels like you're kind of banging your head against a wall because you're talking in an echo chamber and nobody's actually responding to you. So I feel like that is, I'm going to put together the list of what I think the next items are to do, and I'll email that to everyone.
Right.
And then I just wanted to have some clarification, Steve, as far as are you willing to help with the onboarding as far as getting those water sample tests done? Is that a task that you're willing to take on?
Absolutely.
That would be
Yeah, I
great.
mean, number one, I think we need to identify, is there a local legitimate water quality testing lab?
Mhm, mhm.
And, you know, it's within my qualifications, I'm qualified to do lab audits.
Mhm.
And so I can go into, if there is a local lab, I can go into the lab and audit their methods if they're open to it. And if they're not open to it, we need to build a lab.
Mhm.
And here, you know, here's the thing with lab testing. Lab testing is only as valid as the openness of the lab with their methodology.
Mhm.
If there's a local lab and I request to do an audit of the lab and I'm turned down, that's a red flag that's
Oh,
not
yeah.
a trustworthy lab.
Right. Right.
And
Okay.
so a good, reliable lab will openly and willingly do an audit from anybody, anytime, for any reason.
How do we
And it-
find out about that?
Well,
I
he's
think-
gonna do that.
Well,
That's
you're
his,
gonna check it
that's
out.
his area.
I'll take on any responsibility associated with water quality testing.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And I did find out that there is, so here in La Cruz, there is K through 12, preschool through 12 education and undergrad education here in La Cruz. So you can go preschool through a bachelor's degree here in La Cruz. In addition to that, I just recently discovered that there is a marine biology institute that's
Right.
doing fish counts here in La Cruz.
Great.
So there may be some local resources. So one of the things that I'm going to try to do is identify, is there a local water quality testing lab that the water quality is being assessed with? If there's not, is it possible for us to get the resources to set up a simple water quality testing lab in the Marine Biology Institute or at the university?
Okay.
Through donations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so you understand, I am not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to do water quality testing. I mean, there's a handful of parameters that we would want to look at. Most of them can be done with an instrument known as a UV vis spectrometer, which is a small desktop instrument that can run multiple tests. And, you know, probably the instrument, if we bought it new in the States, would cost $10,000 for the instrument itself. You know, then there would be expenses associated with each particular analysis has a kit, and each kit will probably process 100 samples.
So that tells you that there's probably not a testing lab here. It might be, maybe at the institute.
We
like you
know,
said.
Mariana tells me that Vedanta does it, but again, we don't know why, and we don't know what they do with it.
And are they really testing? And are they testing with a third-party audited lab? Because there's no such thing. If there's a lab that they're testing with that's not third-party audited, then their numbers don't mean anything. You know,
fair enough.
Vedanta could be buying the results that they want from that water testing, and that's
that's true.
That's why you can never ever trust the results from a lab that's not third-party audited.
Okay. So that makes me think, so when you talk about just that small bit of a project and where we would need some funds to support it, if we need to go that route, Karima and I had been talking about, could we piggyback on an existing organization that has a 501(c), or do we actually try to create that so that people can make donations and get the tax benefit of it? And so that's something I'm happy to look into with you, Karima. I don't know where we are on the piggybacking idea, or if there are any organizations out there.
I think that my advice would be to partner with an already existing 501(c). So for instance, like the Friends of Bucerias, and to have some sort of allocation of funding, because I do have a fiscal sponsor, but it is specifically for San Francisco Bay. And any donations that come to me are the fiscal sponsor takes 10% of those donations. So that's something that is a common practice in the 501(c). And, you know, when there's sizable donations of $100,000 and up, you know, 10% really makes a big difference. And at this point, you know, I think that if we can come up with $25,000 to $50,000 this year, then that would be a good push to move these initiatives forward.
Okay, so that organization,
you found information about the quality of the water already, so that may already all be done, like you're saying, Steve, legitimately, that we can maybe verify. Or
the only problem with that is it was written in an article in the Mexican Daily News, but there was no data provided, so there was no way to validate. There's no number, right?
I've already gone through that article thinking that they might report where the water quality testing is being done, and they didn't. But I think that. So in terms of a nonprofit organization here in Mexico, Jason and Myra, from the organizers of the Sunday market here in La Cruz, might be helpful with that. The Sunday market in La Cruz is a nonprofit organization, and a large percentage of all the proceeds that are generated from that market through the organizers go to local initiatives like this.
Great.
Okay.
So they've already
There's also
done
there's an umbrella group called Donate Nayarit, and there's a bunch of groups like A Dog's New Life, for instance. You guys might be familiar with them, where they have the tax, the umbrella group has the tax standing, and all these littler groups are under them. So the donations are filtered through. So I can reach out to them and the people. If you have the contact for these folks over at the market, I'd be happy to follow up on those issues.
I need to check with Nation and see if she got their contact information. And
Okay.
if she didn't, I will find them next Sunday and
Maybe we could, meet them.
Yeah,
Okay.
Say,
absolutely.
hey, this is what we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, just so you know, one of the things that they've done here in La Cruz is they built a skate park and a soccer. You can tell that he's from the UK. He calls it a soccer pitch. They built a skate park and a soccer field for the kids of La Cruz with money from Coca-Cola.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they're really well versed in exactly the type of fundraising and allocation of funds that we're talking about. So let's make a point next weekend of doing a physical introduction with them, and I'll make sure that I get their contact information. And Jason is who told me about the K through 12 education, the university education here in La Cruz, and the fact that there is a Marine Biology Institute functioning here.
Great.
Perfect. And
Steve,
if it's okay,
Oh,
could
go
I
ahead.
say one more? I was thinking if you guys are okay with it, I'd like to do some outreach to the Mexican Daily News and the Puerto Vallarta Daily to see if I can interest anybody in an article, and maybe even partner with Mariana on how we might position it. Is it premature to do that or no?
Maybe.
It might be a little premature to do that, but I think we can benchmark that until we have some, I feel like we should set aside a time to do another meeting. I'm feeling like, what do you guys think about the end of February potentially, or beginning of March for another meeting? Or do we want to do something a little sooner than that?
Go ahead.
I think considering the number of people that we were hoping to get on this meeting that didn't show, it might be better to do something sooner.
Yeah.
And I will do a better job of getting Carlos on. I think Carlos is going to be a great resource for us. He's Spanish speaking. He was born in Mexico. He's lived in the States. He really has a great understanding of both of the cultures. He's passionate about preservation of the bay. And so I will make sure that we get Carlos. I don't have an email from him, but I can reach out to him and reconnect with the professors at the University of Guadalajara near the airport to find out if they can be of any assistance or if there's something that we can do to help their cause. Because I think that because they're doing real research to show what are the determinants of health of the coral, I think that they're either going to benefit from what we do or we're going to benefit from what they do.
Could be symbiotic.
Yeah.
And if that Karima wanted data on our fish populations,
Yes.
if there have been any, changes over the decades or years, and I wonder if that university near you would have any of that data over time.
This is Jason's understanding is that they are doing active fish counting now, and they're giving the data to the local fishermen to encourage the local fishermen to target the fish outside of their breeding cycles.
Cool.
That is good to hear. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, Steve, is the Sea Shepherd folks were telling us about the idea of a ocean museum that is being proposed for La Cruz, and I was wondering if you had heard anything about that.
Yes, Jason mentioned that as well, and Jason thinks that it might be housed in the same complex as the Marine Biology Institute.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, I am just wondering if potentially either the 24th, the 26th of January, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at your calendars and let me know, because the other option is potentially we could set up a meeting for a weekend, because I have a feeling that that's a possible reason why we had such a little maybe like the 22nd. I'm open to doing it on the 22nd
Of,
of
January?
January. I'm looking at January dates, the 22nd through to the 28th. What works best for you all?
I think I need a little more time than that myself. I mean, we can have one. but
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
think I think that's kind of soon.
it's,
Okay.
it's trying to
And
get
I
more
don't-
people that didn't show
Yeah,
up.
Michael, I don't think that we should have any deliverables by that time.
yeah,
Right.
Well, we have
Any of
guests,
us?
with the thing is that
Aren't they-
we really have only really a couple, we have guests that are coming Wednesday and they're not leaving till the 19th.
Mhm.
So that's going to really consume, I mean, we have, it's just going to consume a lot of our time. So it
Yep.
basically for us, it'd be saying like, well, can we have another meeting this Saturday?
Yeah. Well, and I'm not proposing that any of us here today have any deliverables for that meeting. I just
Okay.
feel like it might be beneficial for us to bring in more people that have more resources. So as we're organizing for future action, that if we have more of the players like Carlos and Jason and Myra and the Amigos de Bucerias, we can get more involvement before we really start to hammer out any deliverables.
Mhm.
But by
That
no
makes
means
sense.
do I expect any deliverables from anybody between now and the next meeting.
Yes, that
Okay.
makes sense. I think that Morgan and I are going to craft the to-do list that we were going to start with, and that's something that we'll try to get to people by tomorrow, hopefully. Does that sound like a reasonable?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's not written in concrete. It's just so we can start bouncing ideas off it. Like, well, no, let's take that one off and put this one on or whatever, or just focus on these three or,
Mhm.
Yep.
just so we can start to really coalesce our thinking.
Yep. Yeah, we need to identify tasks and
Yeah.
we need to start to identify tasks and then try to brainstorm about, resources on how we're going to tackle those tasks. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of deliverables in the near future.
Okay, so it sounds like either the 22nd or the 29th.
And I could do the 22nd as long as it's before noon. We have friends from Napa coming in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And Miguel, how about you? Would you prefer, because we could also do the 29th if that,
Does
And
the
that
29th work? That doesn't work for you, Steve?
It does. Yeah, the 29th actually is wide open. There's nothing.
Well, let's see, 29th. Okay. I'm just sending my daughter, who's coming at the end of the month, to ask her, I can't seem to find it, but to send us their itinerary. Yeah, I think that works. I believe they're coming on the 30th or the 31st, so that
think
would
you're
be
right,
okay.
Yeah, I think the 29th would be great.
okay. All right.
That sounds awesome.
What
And,
time are we talking about?
well, would you like to, I don't want to interfere with your paddleboarding schedule. So how about, do you want to say noonish? Because that's usually when the wind picks up.
Yes, that's it. Oh, you know
Absolutely.
too much now.
Okay,
Oh,
noon.
yes.
Yeah, that works for me
Alright.
too. Allows me to do.
And
yeah.
so our new name is Bahia de Banderas Restoration Project.
That sounds like a good place to start to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's BBRP.
Yes.
I like it.
Well,
Great.
thank you.
Great, thank you. So it's 11:35 now, so we definitely went over, but I feel like we tackled identified at least some directions and people that we need to pull into the fold. So
Yeah.
I will send an invitation for the next meeting and a link to
Great.
this recording with the meeting notes. So hopefully this can become a tool for us to share with our potential partners.
Yeah,
Sounds
and
great.
thank you so much for getting this so organizing, and your presentation really was interesting. I got a lot of new ahas out of that.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
I learned a
Yes,
lot
thank
too.
you.
It was very insightful. And I appreciate
good.
your experience in the places where you've worked, because it really shows that you have a cultural awareness that is absolutely essential for this to work.
It sure is, because nobody wants to be told, that they're doing something wrong, and
Yeah.
to mobilize people to recognize that it is in their best interest is really the best thing to do as far as preserving their resources and their livelihood for generations to come.
Yeah. I think that the message needs to be we're empowering people to protect their grandchildren's resources.
Absolutely. And that's something that we definitely speak to in Gabon and in the Galapagos Islands and so forth, to make sure that there's that generational tie to the future of, the planet for the next 100 to 200 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's not our planet, it's our grandchildren's planet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's true. For some of us, anyway.
Well, thank you all for participating, and we will be talking to you soon on the 29th at noon.
Yeah.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Say hello to Greg.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
you guys.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.